Do you trust yourself to make good decisions? I think a lot of anxiety in life comes from the fact that so many of us don't have confidence in our ability to make the right choices in life. This episode is going to be a little bit of a follow up from last week's episode where I talked about anxiety, sadness, and just what happens when we have too many choices or too little clarity in our life when it comes to making some of these major decisions. Where should I go to college? Should I change my career? Should I stay in this relationship with this person? We make a lot of decisions on a day to day basis, some large, some really small, but all of them are all going to add up to our character, to the person we're going to become, and obviously the life that we're going to have, the life we're going to build, the legacy we're going to leave behind us. And so today I want to talk a little bit more about how do you grow in actually trusting yourself to make good decisions. My name is Nathan Crankfield. I'm a Catholic convert, a husband, a father, the host of the Seeking Excellence podcast, a public speaker, a coach, and a sales manager full time. And today I'm very excited to share what I've learned about how I've grown to trust in myself to make good decisions, to lead my family well, to become a manager and leader in my company, and to just generally keep my life on track towards a path of excellence that God has set me on. If you get value out of today's video, give us a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future Seeking Excellence content. Without further ado, let's get into today's episode. All right, before we get started today, I want to remind you of the quote that was really the basis of last week's episode on anxiety and sadness. It's a quote from Alex Hormozy. He said, "Sadness comes from lack of options, and it feels like hopelessness. Anxiety comes from many options but lack of priorities, and it feels like paralysis. Solve sadness with knowledge and solve anxiety with decision and action." And so a question that comes up kind of out of this is, what if I don't trust myself to make the right decision? What if I don't have belief in my ability to make the right call? Because it's one thing to just say, oh, we need to be decisive, but you can also be rash in decisiveness. You can also be cowardly in making decisions where you're just afraid and you're not actually taking action because you just have so much fear. And so I think this is an important question. And one of the things that really comes from this, or that builds up your confidence, your ability to make decisions, is your general confidence and trust in yourself. One thing that is something that I think a society, and especially for many of us who are Gen Z or millennials out there, I'm a millennial. You probably look at me, you're like, you're not Gen Z. You're correct. I'm a millennial. And it's really important to recognize that the self-esteem movement that started with so many millennial children, not started by us, but started by our parents, just telling us, oh, you're a special flower. You're good the way you are. You're so great. And giving participation trophies really did a lot of damage to our long-term confidence, because I think especially for men, just being affirmed in who you are and being told that you're good when you're not, or being praised when you haven't done anything praiseworthy, actually does damage to your confidence. You actually start to realize people are lying to me, and it does real damage to you. One of my favorite quotes from Jason Craig, who's a great Catholic speaker and writer, he especially on masculinity, he says in a talk that I saw him give one time, he said, "There's no such thing as self-esteem. There's only competence. Competence is where your confidence is going to come." Now, you might be thinking to yourself, well, how do I get to that point where I actually have confidence? How do I get to the point where I have a track record that is impressive to myself, most importantly, that has gained my own self-respect, that allows me to build the confidence to trust that I'm going to make the right decisions going forward? This is a great question. And it's hard because you have to start somewhere. At some point, you have to start from scratch. And this is the other thing I think about making decisions that people often forget, is sometimes you have to make a decision and then you make it the right decision. You see things through, even if you've made the slightly wrong choice, especially in some of these not do or die areas. You're not talking about marrying the wrong person, but we're talking about, should you join the basketball team? Should you try a different career? Should you change your major in college? Whatever it is, sometimes you make a decision and you have to make it the right decision, which means that I'm going to see it through to its end, or at least until the next kind of phase or point in my life. And I'm going to work it. I'm going to work the decision. I'm going to work the plan. It's easy to get so caught up in planning and strategizing and brainstorming that you never actually take action. So let's take example of my life. So let's say I'm starting this podcast, or I want to do something that we just recently did, where we said, let's take a pause. Should we kind of take a pause so we can get more content together, get further out on content, make better content, and start to strategize and plan the content a little bit better? And so to do that, I was basically having to take a month off of posting. I kind of posted here and there for a little while, but kind of killing momentum now so that we can restart and really have great momentum and really execute our posting plan going forward. And so there's trade-offs to either decision. It's not going to make or break the podcast and everything that I've built so far to do either route or either option. But once I've made the decision to say, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to take most of the month of June off so I can post consistently starting in July and really try to crush it and make the content a little bit more fundamental to what Seeking Excellence is all about. Kind of do a relaunch, if you will, kind of a soft relaunch of the podcast in July and for the rest of the year. And so to do that, once I've committed, once I've made that decision, the hard part is sticking to it. The hard part is not saying, oh, well, this thing happened. I got really tempted with like the LA riots and the things happening with immigration to say, well, let's get kind of a little bit off topic and I'll record this week, but instead of preparing for future content, I'm going to record this content here. And I start to kind of fall apart with the plan. No, that is where you start to lose your momentum. Sometimes you make a decision and I say, okay, I'm going to prep content in June for July, for example. And the thing that you have to do then is you have to actually work the plan. And you work the plan for a few months. You don't just do it for 2 weeks and say, oh, this isn't working or this is boring. Once you make a plan, you make a commitment, stick to it for a little while. Say you have no confidence because you haven't decided the right gym to go to or what type of workouts or all those kinds of things. You're paralyzed. Just make a decision on how you're going to start getting active again. Make a decision and a commitment on how you're going to start reading again. Make a decision, commitment on going back to confession, getting back to church and going deeper into your spiritual life, and then work the plan for a little while. Just doing it for even 30 days can build the confidence that you need to actually start believing in yourself to start making the right decisions. Once you start to see the fruit of doing good things, you'll have confidence that you're going to be able to do that again. And so part of the fear, I think, in trusting yourself to make the right decision is not just not trusting yourself in your ability to make the right decision. You also probably are lacking confidence in your ability and willingness to actually follow through on that decision. One of the most fundamental things to being a man, in my opinion, and fundamental things to being a mature adult in general, is that you no longer just do things you feel like doing. You do the things you need to do. You do what ought to be done. That, I think, is so key to being a mature adult. It's key to being a man, is to say, I don't just do the things when I feel like doing them. I don't wait for motivation to strike. I don't wait for it to feel comfortable to go back to the gym, for it to feel comfortable to go to confession, for it to feel comfortable for me to have that hard conversation with my boss or with a coworker, or with a friend or my significant other. I do the things that I know need to be done when they need to be done in the way that they need to be done. And so when you actually have that and you have that discipline, that's when you know that you're actually becoming a man. That's when you know you're actually becoming an adult. And so a lot of times too, I think we get this indecision and we get this fear around decisions, not just because we don't think we're going to make the right decision, not just because we're afraid that we can't follow through, but also because we have this unnecessary fear that every decision is do or die. And so few decisions in your life are really that important. Again, aside from choosing your salvation and choosing the person you're going to marry, nothing else really is something that is going to totally wreck your life. I mean, outside of that, when you make those decisions, there's certain things that follow from those. So if you choose, I'm going to be Catholic and I'm going to marry this person, yes, part of those decisions is you're going to have children, you're going to be open to life. There's certain, follow-on decisions that come from those two major ones. Guys, outside of that, you choose a certain job, you can quit that job 6 months later. Probably not great for your resume to quit it 6 months later, but you can quit it 2 years later. Say you're going to live to be 85 years old. Who cares about those 2 years where your job wasn't the most fulfilling thing in the world? Let's say you choose the wrong college major, or you choose this, or you choose to go deeper in a friendship, or you choose to end a friendship. Yes, there's certain things in life that you might regret later, but you can also turn so many of those around. You can try to restart that friendship. You can try to restart the relationship. You can still choose a different major, or go a different path, get different certifications to choose a different career trajectory down the line. And so there's going to be trade-offs and different things when you're making an investment plan for your life, a financial strategy. Yeah, there's trade-offs. There's different things and you might want to change direction in 5 years, in 10 years, or whatever it might be. But you don't have to have this fear, especially if somebody's a person of faith, to pray about a decision, to show to yourself and prove to yourself that I'm somebody who's going to work the plan. I'm going to work it well. I'm going to give it all that I have. Then you can trust that things are going to work out well in the end. You don't have to have this constant fear that, oh, I'm going to ruin my entire life and ruin the lives of everybody around me. This is the value of becoming an excellent human, showing to yourself I have the discipline to be physically in shape, to be a reader and lifelong learner, to be somebody who prays on a regular basis, ideally daily for 15 to 30 minutes a day. and you're proving to yourself that you're growing and you're aiming at something great. You're aiming at becoming a better person. You're aiming at personal greatness each and every day, or at least most days of the week, most days of the month, of the year. Then you start to build that and you have trust in God and you're praying about these decisions, especially the larger they are, the more you're praying about them. You're seeking wise counsel from other people. Then once you make the decision, just work the plan and trust that it's going to work out. And trust that if it doesn't work out, then that's also God's plan for your life. This is the beautiful thing about being a Christian is you don't have to constantly stress about things that happen, because there can be times in your life where God is going to prosper you and things are going to go really well. And there's going to be more trying and difficult times in your life, but you know that as a Christian, it's never going to be just sunshine and rainbows. You have a cross to carry, and so you're going to face difficulty, setbacks, controversy, obstacles, you name it. Okay, so even in the midst of that, even having faith, having trust, I kind of just laid out this framework for saying the larger the decision, the bigger the decision, the more you should pray about it. But how do we know when we're actually overthinking or underthinking something? How do I know, to my point earlier, that sometimes you can be rash where you're too quick to making a decision? How can I balance that? How can I know if I'm in the extremes or if I'm kind of in that virtuous middle when it comes to decision making? One of the things I think keeps people stuck in both of these situations, whether it's overthinking or underthinking, is not having a good feel on your emotions when it comes to decision making. And so a lot of times, some people might push you to say, oh, just be totally rational. You should just make logical decisions. You shouldn't let emotions into your decision making. I don't actually agree with that. I think that emotions should not be your driver, but I do think they should be in the car. I think they should have a voice in how you respond to certain things or how you choose different options. For example, for me, the first thing I want to ask myself when it comes to making a decision of some sort is, well, how do I feel about this decision? And to walk you through this, let's use another real life example. So my wife and I decided last year that this year we were going to move to Kansas City. We were going to move our family from Denver to Kansas City in search of a better life, in search of more family-centered culture, in search of lower cost of living, and a number of other things. But it was a genuinely sad decision for us to make, because we love living in Denver. We love our parish, we love our friends, we love the family that we have here. There's a lot of benefits to being here. So the first decision when we're coming up to this decision point, we're talking about this, for me, before I kind of come to my stance, what I want to ask myself is, well, how do you feel about it? How do you feel about moving to Kansas City? And I want to be able to voice and give myself space to feel all of the feelings and emotions that I'm having, and to document both the good and the bad, and analyze both sides of it. Because it's easy to just say, and what a lot of people will do is, well, how do I feel about leaving Denver? And it's like, well, I just feel sad about it. There's just negative emotion. I am sad about losing my friends. We worked hard to create this friend group and these friendships that we have, my men's groups that I'm in. We love, we love our parish. I'm sad about leaving our parish. I'm angry about the way that the city has deteriorated, and whatever else might be. I feel lonely about the idea of moving to Kansas City, of moving to a new place and having to find new friends and new people and those kinds of things. So you can think about that. But you also have to zoom out a little bit, because you're going to be drawn in, you're going to be sucked into immediately thinking about all the negative emotions. And that's where I think overthinking and becoming a slave to your emotions really happens, because in that first instance, when you give yourself room to feel your feelings, you're going to have all these negative emotions. And a lot of times people aren't even doing this logically or with any awareness or consciousness. They're just immediately thinking about the decision, thinking about the options, and they just think about the negative emotions associated with the change specifically. And so it's easy to think about, you've gotten accustomed to the pain of your status quo. And so if I zoom out a little bit and I think about, okay, what negative emotions or what negative feelings do I attach with staying in Denver? I think, well, okay, it's going to be really hard for me to continue to pay our mortgage and live any type of lifestyle that we want to come close to living. We're not going to have the house that we want to have. We're not going to be able to take the vacations we want to take. We're not going to be able to invest in our future the way we want to. We're not going to be able to help our kids financially the way that we want to with college or buying a house or their weddings in the future. All of that makes me extremely sad. But it's easy to not think about that, because that's not the change. That's the way we're currently living. That's where we're currently at. And so change is always daunting to the human brain, to the human psyche. Knowing that, you can force yourself to think about, okay, not only should I think about the negative emotions with the change, I should also think about the negative emotions I'm going to have if I stay in the status quo, if I keep things the way they currently are. And so thinking about that is really, really helpful. Then I zoom out and say, well, how am I going to feel about that if I move to Kansas City? How am I going to feel on the first of the month when my mortgage is $1,500 or $2,000 less than my current mortgage? How would that feel to have the cushion of an extra $1,000 a month? What would that look like? How is that going to feel for me as a sole financial provider for my family? Having that extra money when we travel to the East Coast and we don't have to stay in the crappy hotel in, Chester, Pennsylvania, the hood suburb of not even suburb, but the hood area outside of Philadelphia. How am I gonna feel when I can just upgrade and stay at the Marriott in the nice suburb of Philadelphia because I have an extra $1,000 a month to be able to do that? How am I gonna feel about the safety and providing and protecting my family when I don't have to always take the cheapest option in everything we do, everywhere we go, all that kind of stuff? And so that is helpful when I have to make educational decisions for my children, or they're getting married, or they wanna buy a house, and I'm gonna have money, God willing, 30, 40 years from now, to be able to help them to do that. How am I gonna feel then? So thinking about those positive emotions that come with the change as well is really, really important. So don't just get sucked into the negative emotions. Allow yourself, and if you're really doing this and it's a big decision, document these things. Do the pros and cons, the negative emotions, the positive emotions on your status quo and on the change. And this kind of gives you this framework. And then you get it all out and you feel that. And to me, I think that, and I know that I'm a little bit more logical minded than I am creative or emotions minded. But I still think for most people that when you get it all out, when you allow yourself to feel all this, you're not suppressing your feelings when trying to make a logical decision, but you have given them the full voice, the floor to just get everything out. And then you can go and say, okay, now that I have all that established, let's look at it from a logical perspective. Let's talk about the pros and cons of each. Again, kind of like the positive, negative emotions to change into the status quo. And so you can think about all of that, and then you can look at it. You can say, cons of leaving, our friends. We do believe that we're going to be able to make new friends in this new place. And so that's kind of a one-to-one trade-off. Even though you love the people you have now, 4 years ago, we didn't know them. And so it's very possible that 4 years from now, we have another great friend group in a new city. And so that's kind of a one-to-one trade-off in my mind. And then you can kind of think about that, and you can look at all these different logical and just rational decision points. And then you can look at it and say, okay, from there, you get to a point where you feel, you pray about it, you think about it, you say, God, what do you want me to do in all of this? And you ask God and you think about that and you give it a few days, you pray about it. Once you start to feel good about one of the options, that's when, and you have peace about it, to me, that's where you know I need to make a decision. Once you come to the point where you say, okay, mostly good feelings about this, I feel good about it, I have peace about it, it's logical, it makes sense, and I feel like it's what's God calling me to do, then you make the decision and you act. And so you don't need to constantly be overthinking, underthinking about it. And I think that so often, and what I've seen with a lot of my family or friends who are chronic overthinkers, is they don't give themselves the time and space to really think things through this way. When you have to make decisions, this is like a lot of times with controversial things or familial relationships or difficult moments I see with family members is they'll sit there and and my family's really big on this, is bringing up like a difficult conversation or situation and then like moving on before the conversation feels like it has closure or it's over. And so this is something my wife and I really try to avoid doing. If we're going to talk about something difficult, let's talk about it until we're done talking about it. You don't bring something up that's kind of, you see a lot of people I think who are more emotionally immature will do this, where they'll bring up a difficult topic and then they'll kind of be like uncomfortable with talking about it. And so they'll just change the subject out of nowhere. You've probably had this happen to you before. And you do it to yourself sometimes too, where you get uncomfortable thinking about it. Don't do that. Sit down in adoration, sit down in church, sit down in your room, your house, pour yourself a drink, light a candle, whatever you need to do, and just sit down with a notebook and just write the things out. And then you'll be able to make the decision. Give yourself time to actually decide. That's so important. The last thing I want to talk about is just how do we set priorities when everything feels important? This is something that I am really big on, seeking excellence. We have our 6 pillars of excellence. We talk about mental, emotional, physical, professional, financial, spiritual being the kind of foundations of excellence in your life. And so that's a lot of different things. It's important for me to read. It's important for me to spend time with my wife and my children, my friends. It's important for me to be physically in shape. How do I make time to go to the gym? It's important for me to be grinding as a sole provider of my family, as somebody who has a full-time job and feels like I'm working multiple other jobs with different side hustles. It's important for me to be praying every day and to be growing in my spiritual life and development, to be volunteering and active and involved in my church. It's important for me to be managing my finances and have a good feel on our budget and our investment plan and all the stuff we're doing. All of that's important. How do I know what to make a priority this week or today? This is where I think that weekly tracking is really, really important. So I constantly harp on this. We have a great weekly tracker that you can use at seekingexcellence.locals.com. We'll post that again this week. If you join us over there, you can join for free and get access to that tracker, or you can join as a subscriber or a paid member that supports the podcast. You help support everything we're doing. I have an intern now who's working for me. I am having to pay for subscriptions and different things like that, and it really helps us to have supporters that help to make the podcast possible. And so you can join over there for as little as $10 per month or $100 per year. If you do that, you'll get a free Seeking Excellence T-shirt, and I'll send you a copy of one of my favorite books, personal growth, personal development. And so if you do that, join today at seekingexcellence.locals.com. You'll get access to this tracker. Why is tracking so important? So tracking is so important because it allows me to see the areas of my life that need the most effort, energy, and prioritization right now. So when I do a weekly check-in with myself, what I call a board meeting or the weekly tracker time, it allows me to see, oh, my spiritual life has been a 5 for 2 weeks in a row. I really need to make time for a holy hour this week. I really need to go to confession this week. I really need to get back in the gym and prioritize these things. So you start to see when you're tracking your life and just giving yourself a score in these major areas. Where am I lacking? Where am I slacking consistently over time? And that shows me that I need to make that a priority. I need to reevaluate my schedule, my time, the way that I'm living my life so I can make my physical health a priority, so I can make reading a priority. Maybe I need to get up 15 minutes early. Maybe I need to just put my phone in another room so that I can make time for reading before bed. All these different things. And so there's great ways to do that. But I think the tracker is really helpful. So go find that excellence tracker, seekingexcellence.locals.com. If you want to talk with me about how we can work one-on-one together to really make the most of this, if you're trying to make decisions in your life, I think one of the biggest benefits of my coaching clients working with me is having somebody they trust and they can talk to that's reasonable, that has these types of framework and the same mindset and values as you to making these big decisions in life. If you want to talk one time or you want to learn more about the Excellent Life program, which is my coaching program, you can go to seekingexcellence.us where you can learn more about that, submit the form, and then I'll reach out to you to set up a time for us to talk. Whether we want to do a quick 30-minute free consultation or you want to sign up for a full hour of coaching or you're interested in signing up for the full program, you can learn more about that at seekingexcellence.us. We'll have all those links in the show notes below. Again, if you enjoyed this video, if you got value out of this, give us a like, subscribe to the channel, share this with somebody else who you know would get value out of this as well. Thanks for listening today. God bless you. I look forward to seeing you next time. And it's time for you now to go out there and be your best.